All right, we are back, and this time we're reviewing the top 10 films we've seen in 2020. Now, we're not lucky enough to get screeners, so we haven't seen films like Nomadland and stuff like that, or
Another
Minari,
round. Another
yeah,
round.
Another Round, One Night in Miami. But we're going to go through the top 10 films that we have seen so far. And we're going to start at number 10. Nick, this is one you've seen and I haven't gotten around to yet. Boys in the Band. What are your thoughts on this film?
What I really love, and I touched a little on this on our ensemble video, that like the cast one is just so like perfectly in tune with each other. They're the same cast to perform this story on Broadway, so they're already in sync with each other. And I just this has a lot of 12 Angry Men Rear Window energy, in the sense that it's a story that takes place really in one room. And I love stories like that, just because like so much of the story then falls on your cast and your writing. Just like, like Star Wars, you're traveling, throughout the galaxy, you encounter all these situations, which is, great for what that type of story is. But in cases like these, like, you're limited in what you can do, you're limited in what you can achieve. So then when something like, really crazy or like great happens, like a lot of it just falls on the writing and the cast. And I think the cast is great. I think the writing, it's a lot smarter than like I initially like thought. Like, I watched this film for Matt Bomer. He's White Collar, Doom Patrol. I really love him. And I was just really surprised by how like just like smart and like in a way, some ways, like relevant this story is. The story technically takes place in the 60s, but it's still like a um very approachable, very easily accessible story about like identity and like self-love, and how you conduct yourself privately versus how like you are like when you put on a mask and like go outside, like figurative mask, not literal mask. But like there's a lot of stuff about like identity and just like self-love that I thought was like very fascinating. And so, the script is also like very, very funny, very funny. There's some things some characters say, I was like, wow, that was legitimately kind of mean. But like there's a lot of like spirit and dynamic and like bite to all of these characters, and I love watching them interact and how things just evolve over the course of the film. So that's why it's up there for me, and I kind of wish it got some more attention.
Yeah, I know it's on my list to see. And I'm going to go for a number 9 film, which I have seen you haven't quite gotten around to yet. And I'm going to keep on talking about it because I think it's that
I'll get
good.
to it.
It,
I'll get
it'll
to
be
it.
higher. Trust me, once you see it, it'll be higher on our list than number 9, our combined list. Small Axe Mangrove. There's a film that's higher on this list that we'll talk about. And I think this is the better version of that.
Mm.
Um, this does a great job of showing what it's like to be black in England, because I think a lot of times we just think about racism being an American problem when
Right.
it's really a global issue, and it has been for centuries. And this addresses what it was like growing up being a restaurant owner, and how police officers would abuse you, and then they do this turns into from a community kind of film on how the community is affected, and it turns as it goes on into a courtroom drama. And this is a fantastic courtroom drama. um, every joke pays off, and the way they convey humor is there are multiple layers. They're jokes, and then they're making fun of how ridiculous the situation is that they have to be in a courtroom for something that is completely, accusations that are completely false against this group of people who were arrested, and who were said to be in places that they couldn't have possibly been in. um, and I think they're fantastic performances. It brings a lot of actors that I've never seen before in any other roles, as well as Letitia Wright, who is amazing in this role. I think she'll definitely be getting some Oscar love come the season around February. Um, but yeah, I just think this film is really, really a great film, and 100% worth the watch. It's on Amazon Prime. Go watch it. Let's move on to our number 8. And Nick, what is our number 8 film?
Charlie Kaufman's I'm Thinking of Ending Things, the one film I feel like could really deserve so much of, but it won't, especially from like the Academy, because it's just one of those like really experimental like indie drums that are like not like won't be on their radar, and it's so unfortunate. It's kind of like what happened to The Lighthouse last year. But this is a film that debuted on Netflix, and it like, what a wild, weird film. It's such a like mind-bending experience in ways that like Memento kind of was Christopher Nolan's what was it 2000 film. This is a film that will like really mess around with like your sense of reality, and this is also admittedly, in my opinion, of the films that like are on this list. This is arguably the most like this is the most existential and arguably the most like cynical, but like there's something fascinating to be had like with these type of conversations, the way that Charlie Kaufman, he directed and wrote the film. There's something to be said about how he like brought this project together. It stars Tony Collette, David Wells, Jesse Buckley, and Jesse Plemons, and they're a solid quartet. There's the whole second act of the film hinges on those four, and the way they play off each other is so tense and like funny in an uncomfortable way. And then it's oh man, I'm trying to like talk about that like not giving spoilers, because this is a film you really just have to go into with like the barest amount of like information. It's just a film that will mess with your reality and also confronts like these really like existential themes about like who are we as a person, like what defines identity, what constitutes living. Funny enough, a lot of themes that will be discussed in another film we'll be talking about later on, but it's definitely a beautifully shot film. It's a very like arguably uncomfortable film. This could be very polarizing depending on your how you like react to it, but I still think it's worth watching. I still think it's worth experiencing, and I would say Jesse Buckley and even Jesse Plemons could deserve some sort of award nomination, but they probably won't get it, unfortunately, just because it's not the type of film the Academy would award, which is unfortunate because it really does deserve so much.
Yeah, so let's move on to our number seven. This is the last of the films on our list that not one of us hasn't seen, and because of that, they're lower on this list. They may be better films, but
Right. Mhm.
one of us or the other hasn't seen it yet. This is my personal number one film of the year, and that's The Sound of Metal. It's a story about how Riz Ahmed, who's playing the titular character, basically goes deaf. He's a drummer in a rock band, in like a punk rock band, and he goes deaf overnight, and how that changes his life. And the use of sound mixing really is like next level immersive. It reminds me of A Quiet Place and how sound is used to be so immersive in a film. And I'd argue it's even better in that scenario. And it's really emotional because it really brings you through this whole journey. And I'm blanking on the name of the actor who plays part of the deaf community. He's like the head of the deaf community that Riz Ahmed's character goes to. He should also be nominated. I'd argue based on the performances I've seen that he should probably win from what I've seen so far. He's that good. This really tears on your like heart, and you really makes you feel for Riz Ahmed and the pain he's doing. He's music's his life, and all of a sudden he can't hear. Like, how does that change everything? And it really does a great job of you know telling us the story of how someone who goes deaf and kind of loses their path in life kind of finds purpose. And I think it does a really great job of being an emotional movie and bringing us into a world or a part of this world that we don't really understand and giving us somewhat of a lens. So that's our number seven film. Now we move on to number six. And Nick, you hinted at this earlier when you were talking about uh, your number eight film, which is I'm thinking of ending this. Now we're talking about Soul, the animated film that dropped on Disney Plus. Um, Nick, what made this film special to you?
I won't say too much just because we did a whole review on it, so you can catch our full thoughts there. But it's such a beautiful film. That's like the like I feel like beautiful is like a term that could be applied to like a lot of films very easy. But I feel like no film this year, or I guess last year at this point, deserves that like designation more than Soul, because in terms of story, it's such like a wonderfully brilliant and like heartwarming story. It's like the Pixar formula, like but like it just they had like just like such like creative like juice like flowing through it. They were like operating at the highest level, and then just animation wise, it's so gorgeous to look at. There's so many like the fall season and New York City. I believe that's where they were in New York City. Like it's never looked prettier in my opinion. Like even compared to like live action films, I don't think I can't. I'm trying to remember like any other film that captured New York City or the fall season like more beautifully than it. Yeah, like like it's they did it in such a way that felt so real, but so like magical at the same time. And that's just the people at Pixar for you. And the story again, such a if they had done this in like on an adult like level or whatever, like I'm thinking of ending things, then like it still would have been like really great. But the fact that they were able to still again maintain their like Pixar like family standard, and they were able to like just balance it all perfectly, that is incredible to me. And I love how they were able to pull it off.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things to note is this is a film that, of course, it's an animated film, but if you're someone who's not really into animated films, you're older, you're like, I'm not really a fan. This is still a film for you. Um, I think the animation style makes it easier for adults to digest, and I also think that the story is an adult story, and it will definitely resonate for you, especially if you feel like you're having a midlife crisis because our character is,
Right.
and kind of struggling to find purpose because
Yeah,
that's what this story is
great.
about
It's the
without
greatest.
spoiling.
It's the greatest adult film disguised as a kids film ever.
100%. Um, and we're going to move on to our number five, Bad Education. This stars Allison Janney and Hugh Jackman in this film. Hugh Jackman, I think, is fantastic. And this story about this, these corrupt heads of this massive public school that has these great test scores, and then starts stuff to unravel about the corruption that's been going on in the school and stealing money. Um, Ray Romano also plays a small role in it. And oh gosh, I'm gonna, you take over. I'm gonna look up this actress's name because she deserves the credit.
Yeah, so we did another review on this too. I think it was one of our first videos ever on the channel, actually. So you can go check that out. But Bad Education is such like a very clever film, a lot more than like similar to Boys in the Band. Like I wasn't not that I wasn't expecting much of it, but like it caught me off guard in a good way. And I was really like, wow, like this film was just a lot smarter about how like they portrayed their characters and how they wrote everyone. Like everyone, like it reminds me a little of the show Cobra Kai in the sense that like there were good guys and there were bad guys, but it was like it wasn't that like black and white. There was like these were still relatively like good people, or like at least like normal people with sometimes like good intentions, bad intentions, mixed up intentions. I loved how they utilized Geraldine Viswanthan. Hopefully I didn't butcher her last name. I loved how her character was utilized as a like she really could have just been used as a plot device to like undo Hugh Jackman and Allison Janney's plan. But like she had her own like merit and like personality and like perspective in the story. I love how I love her performance. I love Jackman's performance. I love Janney's performance. And honestly, this like might be like Jackman's best performance since Logan, like 3 years ago. Like and I love how different these two are. It's like Logan was really haunted and like screwed up, and then here he is. He's like almost like a con man, but like a genuine con man, if that like makes any sense. And I loved how just effortlessly charismatic he was.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it is Geraldine. Oh my God, I'm going to blank on her last name again.
Sorry.
Um, Viswanathan.
Okay.
I probably butchered her name. I'm sorry. She's great. Definitely go check her out. She deserves some bigger roles because I think she's really good in this film as being the kind of the lens from the audience's perspective on what's happening. Um, I agree with. I think Allison Janney's also great in the supporting role. She's great at playing kind of this unlikable character that for some reason you just like sort of like her for some reason. I mean, Hugh Jackman's great. I'm not saying it's one of the best performances of his career because I mean,
Mhm.
Logan, Prisoners, and
Right.
even more really fantastic. But let's move on to our number four film, which is The Five Bloods. What are your thoughts on The Five Bloods?
I would say arguably of all these films, this might be the most ambitious just in terms of like scope and what like Spike Lee tried to do. I mean, it's both treasure hunt film. It's like it's part Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's also part like Saving Private Ryan or whatever. And like it's a war film. You had them like flashing back to then. You had them touching on like PTSD and like um like the black experience in America, and they had so much like going on, but like it was done with Spike Lee's unique flair, and I think that contributed a lot to helping like compress a lot of what he was trying to discuss and how it was like just streamlined. He, I think he could very well earn a Best Director nom for this. I mean, he already earned one for Black Klansman, but like I don't know, like, he managed just the scope of it all, like, really well. I loved him, like, playing around with, like, the aspect ratios throughout when they'd switch from, like, either, like, the flashbacks or when they were in, like, the city, Vietnam, and then they were, like, we're back in, like, the wilderness. I loved, like, all the technical stuff like that. I think the music and the personality on the technical side of things was really apparent. I really enjoyed that. And, of course, the performances were what anchored it down. I think you and I in our ensembles, we had the Bloods at like the second best ensemble, something like that, and they totally deserve it. Delroy Lindo, I mean, he's been the front runner. I know he's your preferred front runner. I have to still iron out mine, but he's definitely going to get nominated. I can't see anyone else like I can't see any way he's not nominated, and it's just a great group of people helping drive this like really fascinating story. And I think it's long as hell, but it's like at the end it's like, oh, it's like a really big, like great experience. So really glad I got to see it on Netflix, but would prefer to see it in theaters, but I'm glad I got to saw it regardless.
Yeah, that to me is a bummer because I think this film in the theater would have been even better. I agree with the aspect ratio. I think it's a really smart usage of how they go between. I don't know if they shot on digital, but looks like digital as opposed to looking like old film, which kind of transports you to the different era that they were in. Well, the Vietnam War was happening versus the modern day. My only critique on it is the runtime because I think the story otherwise is pretty great.
Right.
And Delroy Lindo, he's my number one. It's going to be very hard to push him out of that spot. I know a lot of people love Chadwick Boseman's performance in Ma Rainey, but for me, Delroy Lindo is just another level in that film.
Mhm. Gotcha.
Um, yeah, and Spike, I think Spike Lee is definitely deserving of a Best Director nomination at least. I haven't really thought about my Best Director list. I think we'll probably push that off a little bit. Um, let's go to our number three, which is Trial of the Chicago Seven. Now, this is the film that I said is not as good as Small X Mangrove. Like this is the film. Small X Mangrove is a film that Trial wants to be. We both still
Mhm.
really like this film, and so let's get into the why. Nick, why did you like this film so much?
I want to reiterate the whole cast part, just because like we already they were also on the best hour and best ensembles video, but it's just when you cast like Aaron Sorkin dialogue really can like work with anyone, but like it takes a special person to like just make it like just I feel like roll with such like personality and flair. Jesse Eisenberg in Social Network was one person, Brad Pitt in Moneyball was another, and then now you have the people of Trial, which was just made it really entertaining. I think like this is another really dense story. I feel like because you had like five different like involved parties or whatever. You had like the trial itself. You had the riot. You had the lead up to the riots and the riots themselves, and then there was like a secondary riot at the end. And then but he was able to real Aaron Sorkin was really able to just combine that all and make it like just snap back and forth without ease. You never lost your place in the story. I remember being really impressed with how like that second riot with where Eddie Redmayne got like upset, like he threw that in like basically in the third act, but I feel like it still like worked with the flow, and I didn't feel like, oh, he like shoved it in there last second. So I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I feel like he might get an Oscar nom for a screenplay just because it's like Aaron Sorkin and like they the Academy loves him or whatever. But I haven't really thought about whether or not he'll be deserving, but I do think like it's still a pretty entertaining time. I also think like it was released, what was it, like September, right? September 2020, something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Um yeah, but like, I think it's just a really like it was just like it still felt so timely with what everything happened with like the Black Lives Matters protest and like the like intense like political spectrum we were all in. Like I think it was just like a very like timely film and just also very reflective of like what was happening. So I think so it's like, excuse me, just one of those films like you can watch, and because of the Sorkin dialogue, like like you're gonna be entertained, and but it's also like it's got a few things on its mind, which I'll give it credit for.
Yeah, I think for me, because you talked about the positives, and I agree with a lot of them. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of why this film is like slowly moving down my list.
Gotcha.
And that's because one, I don't think the riot scenes work as well as they could. Um,
Okay.
I think in the hands of, I like Sorkin as a director. I think he's good, but I don't think he 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 makes a script, I think, as good as it is. I don't think he elevates it. That's kind of how I feel. It's the same thing with Molly's Game. I really like Molly's Game. I don't love it.
Right.
That's the other film he directed. And I think the riot scenes needed to kind of be pushed to a little bit of another level. Um, that kind of made it more intriguing and interesting as it was going on that we didn't quite get. Um, and I also think this film is a film of moments. And I think the problem is there's a lot of stuff in between from moment to moment, from big moment to big moment, I should say, that kind
Right.
of slows down the film. You kind of lose interest. And then there's, cute Sacha Baron Cohen and Jeremy Irons, or not Jeremy Irons,
Very strong.
Jeremy Strong,
Right.
like cue them doing some funny joke, just to kind of keep it going, keep you
Right.
intrigued, which I think is fine and it makes a perfectly good movie. But I think it's missing something that pushes it over the top into like a top film of 2020 for me.
Got you. Got you. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Um, let's move on to our number two. If you're having, if you feel like COVID every day kind of feels like the same, Palm Springs
Mhm.
is that movie for you. Nick, when you saw Palm Springs, were you surprised about how good this movie was?
I mean, I heard it was getting like a lot of hype, and this was another film. I was like, Andy Samberg, Kristen Milotti, Max Barbakow, who's a director I hadn't heard of until this film. I was like, got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, or like got like rave reviews at I can't remember what film festival. I was like, interesting series of events, but I'll roll with it. And then like just on the day it came out, I watched it, and I was like, this is such a like a funny, sweet, and like again a clever film. Like I'm trying to like I feel like it's not my number 1, but I feel like it's like bouncing around in like my top 5, I think ish. And like for good reason. I'm trying to find the words to like describe it. It's just such a sweet like film, and it's like yeah, it has like some like deep things on its mind as well. And I think the way they communicated them was like didn't like tonally unbalance the story, but like a lot of it was just Andy Samberg and Kristen Milotti like screwing around, and it's just like so enjoyable to watch them play off each other, to see their dynamic personalities like go at it. I just love the like ever escalating series of events that happened, and it was so they never felt like it got too out of hand. Like even when like they started getting to the physics of like the loop or whatever, like it never felt like it was like over the top or like too like ridiculous. It just felt like the tone and the pacing for me is like what really, so it's just like they never felt unbalanced even when they started talking about physics or like got existential. And everything just went with it. I admit I haven't seen Groundhog Day, which is probably the most obvious like comparison piece, but I can picture like liking Groundhog Day just as like if it did the same things Palm Springs, then we're just like, even though it was the same day over and over, there's still new things happening, and I loved spending time there.
Right. And I think one of the things is how they make revelations through the time. Once, gosh, I can't remember the actress's name, is now stuck in the time loop as well.
Right.
Um,
Similati, I think is
yeah.
her.
Yeah. I think that is when the film really picks up. I think as it goes on, the second half, the film gets much better and much more entertaining of them like trying to figure out, can they make it out of this loop, right? That's not a spoiler. That's really just kind of the goal of the film. And Andy Samberg's kind of given up on that. He's like, I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting. This is the film that I probably had the most fun with on my first viewing. Like, if you just want to have a fun, good time, this is the film for you. Moving on to our number one film on the list, we have The Invisible Man. Now, I know for me this is weird. This is my number two film of the year, and I'm not a horror fan normally, but I think great horror is not just about the jump scares, it's about the emotional story it can bring you on. And this one has a great emotional story. So, Nick, do you want to speak to kind of how that hit you?
Right. It's man, it's like it's one of the best like executed horror movies I think like ever, like at least like released like in the past like few years, just because like like I love it. Like I genuinely like love it. That was for me one of my favorite films of 2017, I think it was. But like also like it was the classic like here's a scary monster, we'll get you with a jump scare here and there, we'll play up that like really create like supernatural horror aspect. But here with the Invisible Man, like, even though like yeah, like a guy's invisible, it really it really did well with like paranoia and like that like just like unsettling feeling I think we all have when it's like, are we like are we alone in this room? Like that feeling of like someone's like watching you, whatever. There's just um there's just so many moments that I felt like they utilized that like aspect and that like emotional power to like to the largest extent that they possibly could get out of it. There's the one scene where she's like Elizabeth Moss is like getting clothes from like her like rack or whatever, and then like the camera's like following her. Then all of a sudden it just like pans to like her clothes and like this little like sitting area, and it just holds there. They don't the Invisible Man like isn't there, or like maybe he is, we don't know. It just the camera just moves there. It doesn't even telegraph that like there's some like there's a bad guy out there. It just holds there, and there's that like just uncomfortable feeling of you like I don't like this. Like this is so like it's suffocating, and I love that aspect. They really used like such a novel aspect of a guy who you can't see. They use it to most extreme extent, and I love that. This film looked beautiful too. Like there were scenes, and I think like what's his fate? What's the bad guy's name? Adrian's house, like the scenes like in his like lab or whatever, just like quiet moments where she's like where Elizabeth Moss is going around the hallways that looked so like beautiful and like uneasy at the same time. Um, and I love the narrative they use to like establish it with like the whole like she's trying to tell someone that some like a man is like abusing her and like haunting her, but no one believes her. Like I thought that was such a great um that was such a great way to still ground the story in reality. Like it could have just been a basic like Michael Myers is like going house to house killing people, and I love the original Halloween, I do, but I love that they chose to specifically ground the Invisible Man story in like such a timely and like real context. Like it still felt like this is one of the most realistic horror films I think ever made, even in comparison to like even like us kind of like stooped a little over into like over the top with like the whole like cloning thing. That's not really a spoiler. You see it in the trailer, but like the Invisible Man still felt grounded and like realistic, and it still felt like this could happen to anyone, even though like no one's developed that tech just yet. So I really enjoyed. For me, yeah, it's like it's in my top five. It's not my number one. I'm thinking of ending things still is, but it's still a great time. I had so much, not necessarily fun, but I had a great time like experiencing it all the way.
Yeah, I think for me, the other things that I really love about this is there's the action set piece in the what is it, the end of the second act, um, where he's in the suit, she stabs him.
Yeah. Mhm.
Spoilers, this isn't that bad of spoilers, and it's kind of shown in the trailer. This action set piece in a hallway that takes place. The camera work there, I think they have like a robotic camera where they have it so it can just basically. I know they used it if you look at the behind the scenes for the film, in the kitchen fight scene as well, where they can just get to very specific places in it. The movements of the camera is a little bit robotic and it works. And I thought it was a really creative use of the camera to make you feel the horror in an unorthodox way. And I agree with you. The way they do simple pans where you're like, is he there? Is he not? You're literally living what Elizabeth Moss's character is living in that moment. I think there's great performances. We have one of the people who is now in Black Adam.
Mhm.
I'm
Uh,
blanking on his name,
Alice Hodge.
Aldous Hodge, and then you have Storm Reed as well, who do a great job as being like, I think Elizabeth Moss is going crazy until everything flips on its head for them.
Right.
Um, and I think this film wraps in a really satisfying way. I think that final scene kind of pays off emotionally. Everything that's been going
Mhm.
on and sort of the freedom she gets at the end of the film,
Right.
from doing what she does, I think really brings a satisfying ending to this film. And it's emotionally anchored. I love the scene where, the cushion just, there's an imprint in the cushion, but you don't see anything.
Yeah.
And you're like,
100%.
oh no. And she sees it and then it's gone. And she calls someone and they don't
Mhm.
believe her. Like you feel her struggle because you're like, oh my God, no one's believes her. She's screwed. She's gonna be haunted for the rest of her life. And I think this is an excellent film, one of my favorite horror films, and definitely deserves to be in anyone's top five. We have it as our combined number one for the
Right.
year.
Yeah, like and just like a last thing on it, like maybe it's like more like pop culture than like certain other films, but like so was like Mad Max Fury Road or like whatever. Like that was like just like well executed film. So was A Quiet Place. They just utilized like all the technical aspects like really well. The screenplay is so much more smarter than I feel like people would anticipate from like a classic like monster movie. It's so much more than that. So well, it's so well executed, and can't recommend it enough.
So with that, that wraps up our top 10 list of 2020 so far. And definitely leave a comment down in the comment section below. What films did we leave off that you think deserve to be in the top 10?
Mhm.
What in our order was wrong? Let us know whatever you thought on our list down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video, and we'll see you next time.
Peace out.